A two-warehouse inventory model for perishable items with ramp-type demand and partial backlogging. Abstract: in this paper, a two-warehouse inventory model for perishable items with ramp-type demand has been developed in which shortages are allowed and partially backlogged. The model so developed has been discussed for two scenarios. I. Demand rate becomes constant before the time at which the inventory level reaches zero in rented warehouse. 2. Demand rate becomes constant when rented warehouse is empty and demand is fulfilled from own warehouse. Numerical example for each scenario has been solved to maximize the total profit and obtain optimal order quantity. Finally, sensitivity analysis has been carried out to analyze the behavior of presented model. Keywords: inventory, two warehouse, perishable, ramp type, partial backlogging. 1. Introduction. Perishable or deteriorating items are those which have finite or limited shelf life. In inventory systems, decay or deterioration of physical goods, such as seasonal products, medicines, volatile liquids, etc., with time is a natural phenomenon. Deterioration of goods during their normal storage period is major and realistic problem in any inventory system. Inventory models with deteriorating items have been progressively modified by various researchers in few decades to make them more practicable and realistic. The analysis of deteriorating inventory begun with Garg and Schrader, 1963. They established the classical inventory model without shortage and with a constant rate of decay. Goyal and Giri, 2001, presented an excellent review in the field of inventory control of deteriorating items. Yang and Wei, 2002, presented a production inventory policy for deteriorating items with a constant production and demand rate. Ghosh and Chaudhary, 2004, developed an order-level inventory model for deteriorating items considering two-parameter Weibull distribution deterioration, and demand as a quadratic function of time. They solved model analytically and obtain optimal solution with a numerical example. He et al., 2010, developed an optimal production inventory model for deteriorating items, where manufacturers sold the goods to multiple markets with varying demands. An up-to-date review of published work about deteriorating inventory models for the period 2012 to 2015 was presented by Jansen et al., 2016. Sharma et al., 2018, analyzed an inventory model for deteriorating items assuming constant deterioration rate with expiry date and time varying cost. Koksat and Golamian, 2020, introduced an inventory models for deteriorating items with advanced payment. In this model, they studied the effect of deteriorated items on deterioration rate of adjacent items and established a relationship between number of inspections and deterioration rate. It is observed that demand of some useful newly launched products such as electronic goods and fashionable goods increases at the beginning and ultimately stabilizes and become constant. This kind of demand pattern seems to be quite realistic and is termed as ramp type. Thus, in case of ramp type demand, the demand increases linearly at the beginning and then the market grows into a stable stage such that the demand becomes a constant till the end of the inventory cycle. Hill, 1995, first considered the inventory models for increasing demand followed by a constant demand and termed it as ramp type demand pattern. Wu, 2001, developed an EOQ model with ramp type demand and partial backlogging. They assumed that partial backlogging rate depends on waiting time and next replenishment. Giri et al., 2003, extended the ramp type demand inventory model with a more generalized Weibull deterioration distribution. Manna and Chaudhary, 2006, analyzed an inventory models for deteriorating items considering ramp type demand rate, wherein the production rate is function of demand rate and deterioration rate is time proportional. Panda et al., 2008, developed an inventory model for perishable seasonal products with ramp type demand. Scoury et al., 2009, presented inventory models with ramp type demand rate, partial backlogging and Weibull deterioration rate. Sunny and Chukwu, 2013, proposed an EOQ model with 3-parameter Weibull distribution deterioration, shortages, and ramp-type demand, and established necessary and sufficient conditions for the optimal replenishment policy. Wang and Huang, 2014, studied a production inventory model for a seasonal deteriorating product. In this model, demand has been considered as price and ramp-type dependent. Chandra, 2017, discussed an inventory model with ramp-type demand, price discount, and backborders in which holding cost has been expressed as linearly increasing function of time. Saha et al., 2018, analyzed an inventory model for deteriorating items with ramp-type demand and price discount under the effect of partial backlogging. Yadav et al., 2020, explained an inventory model for deteriorating items with stock-dependent and ramp-type demand considering reserve money and carbon emission. The classical inventory models are mainly developed with the single storage facility. It implies that the available warehouse has unlimited capacity in those models. But in practice, the capacity of any warehouse is limited. When management has to purchase, or produce, large amount of units of an item that cannot be stored in the existing warehouse, i.e. own warehouse, at the marketplace due to its limited capacity, then in such a situation excess units are stored in a rented warehouse, RW, which is located at some distance away from AO. Normally inventory managers decide to hold more items than that can be stored in AO when the replenishment cost is higher than the other related costs, or the demand of items is very high, or the managers are obtaining an attractive price discount on bulk purchase, and so on. Here it is assumed that RW is sufficiently large, i.e. it can be made large as per situation. Inventories are first stored in AO with excess going to RW. But while retrieving goods for consumption, it is always from RW first, and when RW is empty then the goods are retrieved from AO, as the storage conditions in RW are poorer than in AO and holding cost is more in RW than in AO. A two-warehouse inventory model was first developed by Hartley, 1976. He considered the model in which holding cost of RW is greater than that in AO. Sarma, 1983, extended Hartley's model by introducing the transportation cost. Goswami and Chaudhary, 1992, developed the model with or without shortages by considering a linear demand, the equal shipment cycle. Joe, 1998, presented a two-warehouse model for deteriorating items with time-varying demand and shortages during the finite planning horizon. Dai et al., 2007, developed an inventory model for deteriorating items with capacity constraint and time proportional backlogging rate. Rong et al., 2008, presented an optimization inventory policy for a deteriorating item with partially/fully backlogged shortages and price-dependent demand under two-warehouse system. Day et al., 2008, proposed a two-storage inventory problem with dynamic demand under inflation and time value of money over finite time horizon. Matty, 2011, developed a two-warehouse production inventory problem under fuzzy inequality constraints. Sharma et al., 2013, presented a two-warehouse inventory model in which they evaluated impact of reduction rate in selling price with volume flexibility. Ranjan and Uthayakumar, 2015, studied a two-warehouse inventory model for deteriorating items having different deterioration rates and permissible delay with exponentially increasing trend in demand. Singh et al., 2018, proposed a two-warehouse inventory model in which demand rate varies exponentially with time and deterioration of items follows two-parameter Weibull distribution under the effect of inflation. Chauhan and Yadav, 2020, presented a two-warehouse inventory model wherein demand depends on stocks using genetic algorithm under the effect of inflation. Furthermore, shortages occur in the system when the product required by the customers is not available. In this situation, the customer either waits for next replenishment or moves to other places to buy product. The length of the waiting time for the next replenishment would determine whether the backlogging will be accepted or not. Therefore, the backlogging rate should be variable and depends on the waiting time for the next replenishment. Many researchers such as Park, 1982, Hollier and Mark, 1983, and Wee, 1995, considered the constant partial backlogging rate, whereas researchers such as Abad, 2000, Chang and Dai, 2001, Wang, 2002, Papachristos and Scoury, 2003, have modified inventory policy by considering the time proportional partial backlogging rate. Dai, 2007, formulated a joint pricing and ordering policy for deteriorating inventory. Shortages were allowed and partially backlogged. San Jose and Garcia Laguna, 2009, presented an inventory model with full backlogging and all units quantity discounts. C and Dai, 2010, developed an inventory lot size model for deteriorating items under inflation with partial backlogging over a finite planning horizon. Sharma and Singh, 2013, proposed an inventory model for deteriorating items with partial backlogging considering stock and selling price dependent demand rate in fuzzy environment. Dutta and Kumar, 2015, presented an inventory model having time-dependent demand and holding cost under partial backlogging. Singh et al., 2016, analyzed an inventory model with multivariate demands in different phases and partial backlogging. In this model, effects of customer returns and inflation have been taken into account. Singh et al., 2017, proposed a production inventory model for deteriorating items with time-dependent demand rate and demand-dependent production rate considering that shortages are allowed and partially backlogged. Singh et al., 2019, developed an inventory model for deteriorating items with partial backlogging assuming incremental holding cost. The structure of presented article is as follows. Notations and assumptions used throughout the paper have been given in Section 2. In Section 3, a two-warehouse inventory model for perishable items with ramp-type demand and partial backlogging has been formulated. In this section, model is developed for two realistic scenarios. Also, numerical example has been solved, to maximize total profit and obtained optimal ordering quantity, and sensitivity analysis is carried out with respect to parameters to show the behavior of model in each scenario. The paper has been closed with conclusion in Section 4. 2 Assumptions and Notation. To develop the present mathematical model, the assumptions and notations adopted are as follows. Assumptions. 1. Replenishment is instantaneous, and lead time is 0. 2. A single item is considered over a prescribed period of time. 3. The time horizon of the inventory system is finite. 4. The owned warehouse, AO, has a fixed capacity of W units, the rented warehouse, RW, has unlimited capacity. 5. The goods of AO are consumed only after consuming the goods kept in RW. 6. To guarantee the optimal solution exists, it is assumed that the maximum deteriorating quantity for items in AO is less than the demand rate, that is 2W dt. 2W dt. 7. The unit inventory costs, including holding cost and deterioration cost, per unit time in RW are higher than those in AO, that is 11122 CCCC. Plus. 8. Shortages are allowed. Unsatisfied demand is backlogged, and the fraction of shortages backordered is, where the waiting time up to the next replenishment and D is a positive constant. 11x plus x. Notations. 1 and B. The deterministic demand rate per unit time, which increases with time at a decreasing rate. 1001 0,0 BDT BB bait equals dash plus 10 BBA. 2A is the replenishment cost per order. 3C is the purchasing cost per unit. 4S is the selling price per unit, where SC. 5W is the capacity of the owned warehouse. 6Q is the ordering quantity per cycle. 7 is the maximum inventory level per cycle ME. 8 is the holding cost per unit time in RW. 11C. 9 is the holding cost per unit time in AO, where 12C. 1112 cubic centimeters. 10 is the shortage cost per unit time 2c. 11 is the opportunity cost due to lost sales per unit time 3c. 12 is the deterioration rate in RW, where 101. 13 is the deterioration rate in AU, where 201. 14t is the length of the replenishment cycle. 15 is the time at which the inventory level reaches 0 in RW1t. 16 is the length of period during which the inventory level depletes in AU due to both demand and deterioration, where 2tkt equals 0.1k. 17 is the level of positive inventory in RW at time t, RW at. 18 is the level of positive inventory in AU at time t, OW at. 19 is the level of negative inventory at time t, bit. 20 is the known time at which demand becomes constant, where 1kt equals dt. 101k. 3. Formulation and solution of the model. There may be two scenarios in the discussion of formulation of the present model according to the position of time when demand rate becomes constant. 3.1 Scenario 1, when 10t. In this scenario the demand rate becomes constant during the period when demand is fulfilled from RW only. Therefore the following time intervals and are considered separately. During the interval, the inventory levels are depleted from RW and AU. In RW, the inventory is depleted due to the combined effects of demand and deterioration, and in AU, the inventory is depleted only by the effect of deterioration. During the interval, the only change in the equation of formulation is that the demand becomes a constant at RW and the inventory level reaches 0 at time in RW. During the interval, the inventory level in RW is 0 and thus the inventory is depleted due to the combined effects of demand and deterioration in AU. Furthermore, at time, the inventory level reaches 0 in AU. Period is stock out period and some demand is lost while a fraction of the demand is backlogged. The graphical representation of the model is shown in figure 3.1. 1t. 3.1.3 Numerical example. A practical model is considered taking the following values for different parameters, equals 0.01, equals 100, and 33.75, equals 0.75, equals 0.012, equals 0.011, t equals 12 months equals 0.067, equals 132.829, capacity of the owned warehouse W equals 845, A equals Rs 200/order, C equals 18 rupees per unit, equals 2 rupees per unit, equals 0.25 rupees per unit, equals 0.40 rupees per unit, equals 0.60 rupees, equals 0.9, S equals 25 rupees per unit A. Using the solution procedure described in the model, the optimal results obtained are, equals 0.505256, equals 1.3765, equals 6,087.74 rupees and equals 1,266.20. Thus when the demand becomes constant at equals 0.804 months, the RW is emptied at equals 1.3765 months, after which demand is fulfilled from AU. The inventory in AU lasts for equals 6.063072 months of the replenishment cycle, thereby giving the maximum profit equals R 6087.74 on optimal order quantity equals 1266.20. Asterisk K. 3.1.4 Sensitivity analysis. The sensitivity analysis is performed by changing the values of model parameters and in order to discuss the effect of their changes on the optimal values of order quantity Q and total profit P. The percentage changes in optimal values of order quantity Q and total profit P have been determined when one of the model parameter is changed by 20% and 50% and other are kept unchanged. The percent changes in Q and P have been presented in Table 3.1. 01 BBAW. A careful study of Table 3.1 reveals that the optimal order quantity Q is highly sensitive with respect to model parameter, whereas it is slightly sensitive with respect to model parameters and. Furthermore, the total profit P is highly sensitive with respect to model parameter, while it is slightly sensitive with respect to model parameters and 0B. This is the scenario where the demand becomes constant when rented warehouse is empty and demand is fulfilled from L. Therefore the following time intervals N are considered separately. During the interval, the inventory is depleted due to the combined effects of demand and deterioration from RW, and the inventory is depleted only by the effect of deterioration from L. During the interval, the inventory level in RW is 0 and thus the inventory level at OW is depleted due to the combined effects of variable demand and deterioration. During the interval, the only change in the equation formulation in OW is that the demand becomes a constant at OW. Furthermore, at time, the inventory level reaches 0 in OW and shortage starts to occur. During, some demand is lost while a fraction of the demand is backlogged. A graphical representation of the scenario of the model is shown below in Figure 3.2. D. 3.2.2 Numerical example. A practical model is considered taking the following values for different parameters, equals 0.6, equals 15, equals 0.8, equals 0.12, equals 0.11 t equals 15 months equals 0.7, equals 14.9279, capacity of the owned warehouse W equals 1000, A equals Rs 200/order, C equals 2.5 rupees per unit, equals 0.50 rupees per unit, equals 0.20 rupees per unit, equals 0.10 rupees per unit, equals 0.10 rupees, equals 0.9, S equals 25 rupees per unit. Using the solution procedure described in the model, the optimal results obtained are, equals 0.704732, equals 0.798188, equals 1076.28 rupees and equals 1035.91. Thus the RW is emptied in equals 0.798188 months, after which demand is fulfilled from OW, where the demand becomes constant at equals 10.5 months. The inventory in OW lasts for equals 10.57098 months of the replenishment cycle, thereby giving the maximum profit equals Rs 1076.28 on optimal order quantity equals 1035.91. 1 KT equals 3.2.3 Sensitivity analysis. In scenario 2, when the sensitivity analysis is performed in a similar manner as for scenario 1, when with respect to changes in model parameters and have been presented in table 3.2. 112, TTT, plus 10, T. Here, table 3.2 shows that the optimal order quantity Q is highly sensitive with respect to model parameter, while it is slightly sensitive with respect to model parameters and. Moreover, the total profit P is highly sensitive with respect to model parameter, whereas it is slightly sensitive with respect to model parameters and. For conclusion. In this paper, an inventory model is developed for two warehouse storage problem with ramp type demand and partial backlogging to maximize the total profit and optimal ordering quantity. The presented model is discussed for two scenario, I. Demand rate becomes constant before the time at which the inventory level reaches 0 in RW2. Demand rate becomes constant when RW is empty and demand is fulfilled from L. This model could be very useful in retail business where the storage capacity in L, which is at a busy marketplace, is limited. An analytic formulation of the problem on the framework satisfying the assumptions of the model and optimal solution procedure to find optimal profit is presented. Numerical example for each scenario has been solved to illustrate the model. Sensitivity analysis with respect to parameters has been carried out. The proposed model incorporates some realistic features that are likely to be associated with some kind of inventory. It can be used for electronic components, fashionable goods, cloths, foodstuff and other products which have more likely the characteristics above. The present study can be future extended for some other factors involved in the inventory system.